Okay, we're going to continue talking about slope-intercept form of a linear equation. And the warm-up here is just to make sure that we've got that format down. So slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept form, and we've got to know what each one of these are. Remember, the x's and the y's, those are the numbers that we plug in or get out. Those are the points that make the equation true. And m is the slope. That represents how steep the line is and in which direction it slants. And b is called the y-intercept. That's where it crosses the y-axis. And even though the b comes second, we actually start with that one. That kind of anchors our line on the y-axis, and then we use the slope to figure out how steep it is and whether it goes up or down from left to right. So on these examples right here, we've talked about the basics and practiced those already. So what I'm going to do first is we're just going to go through and we're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept on each one of these. So if you take a look at the first one, y equals negative x plus 2. I'm not going to write this on every single one, but I am going to write it here. We're going to do the mx plus b. So if you ever get stuck, you can always write that right next to the equation and then just grab the points that, or grab the numbers that match up. So it says the y-intercept and is b and the slope is m. So we're going to find the y-intercept first. Now you'll notice that we're actually finding that first on these because that's what we use first. So the y-intercept is negative 2 and the slope is negative, well, let's see, that would be a negative 1. It's assumed to be a 1 there, so it would be negative 1. On this one right here, again, we're going to find the y-intercept first. So the y-intercept is the constant at the end, so that's a 5. That means it's going to cross the y-axis at 5. And then the slope would be this coefficient out in front here, so that's going to be negative 3/4. Notice that I put the negative on the top, kind of just a habit. It can go on the bottom, it can't go on both for sure, but we'll talk more about that in just a minute. And then on example number 9, you'll notice that on this one we do not have an x term. So if you needed to, as a reminder, mx plus b, the way we'd have to write that would be y equals 0x minus 4. If there is no x term, then the slope would be 0. So that makes this just the constant, so that's the y-intercept of negative 4. And then the slope on this line is 0. Now we should know what that's going to look like. That should be a perfectly flat line, so we'll be looking for that as we graph this. And then on this one, you'll notice that the y-intercept is missing. There's no constant term on here. There's just the coefficient. So that means that the y-intercept would be 0 and the slope would be 2. Okay. So now we're going to go back to example 7, to the first one here, and let's go ahead and graph that. So we take the y-intercept and let's plot that point. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so we can see a little closer up as to what's going on here. So we'll take that y-intercept of negative 2, we'll put a dot right there, and then we take the slope, and remember the slope is a fraction, so I'm going to write it like this, negative 1 over 1. And this is going to tell us what the rise is on top and the run is on the bottom. So from here, the rise is negative 1, so we're going to go down 1, and the run is positive 1, so we're going to go to the right one. So we're going to go down 1 and right 1, down 1 and right 1, down 1 and right 1, and we're just going to continue on. Pretty easy pattern on this particular one. Now, again, it's always a good idea to go the other way a couple points. So instead of going down and right, we're going to go up and back. Up 1, back 1, up 1, back 1, up 1, back 1. So we follow this pattern. It's just this nice diagonal. Notice that slope of negative 1. It's going down from left to right. Looks awesome. So I'm just going to grab the line tool right here, stretch it from one end to the other, and lock it in, and we're all set to go. So this one crosses at negative 2, crosses the y-axis at negative 2, and then the slope is negative 1. We're looking for a line that kind of is a perfect 45 going down from left to right. So we're in great shape on that one. Let's slide over here and take a look at number 8. On number 8, again, we're going to start with the y-intercept. The y-intercept is 5, so I'm going to put a dot right there. And then the slope is negative 3/4. It's already written as a fraction, so here's what we're going to do. The rise is negative 3 and the run is 4. So we're going to go down 3 and we're going to run 4. Make sure we count really carefully on this one. Then we're going to go down 3 and we're going to run 4. Okay, and notice how they line up here. down 3, and run 4, we'd kind of be off the chart right there. So definitely those two or those 3 are good enough. Let's go the other direction. Again, the opposite of going down 3 and right 4 would be up 3 and left 4. Now let me show you how that works if we were to write this down. Remember, you can take a negative and you can write it on the top of a fraction, you can write it out front, or you can write it on the bottom. We just can't write it on both. So if I were to slide this down on the bottom, this would be a rise of 3, so we would go up 3, and then the run would be negative 4, so we would go left 4. So we're going to go up 3 and then left 4. So we're going to be right here. Notice how it matches up perfectly. Up 3 and then back 4 would be right about there. Looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and put the line tool on here, stretch it from one end to the other, and there we go. Okay, let's take a look at number 9. This one has a y-intercept of negative 4, so we're going to make sure that it crosses at negative 4. And then the slope is 0, so I'm going to write that as 0 over 1. So that means that the rise is 0, so we don't go up or down, we just go right 1. So we don't go up or down, right 1. Don't go up or down, right 1. So we just continue on in that pattern. And here's the interesting thing. We can go to the left side and watch what happens. If I put 0 over negative 1, it wouldn't make any difference. 0 divided by a number is still going to be 0. So we're just going to go left 1 on each one of these. So don't go up or down, so no rise. And we run as negative 1, no rise, run as negative 1, and we just continue on like that. So we have this nice horizontal line like we were talking about before. Perfectly flat line, crosses at negative 5. And I'm going to slide that down just a little bit. There, that looks better. All set to go there. Let's take a look at the next one. On this one, we had y-intercept of 0, so it crosses at the origin. All right, and the slope is 2, so I'm going to write that as 2 over 1. So that means we rise 2 and we run 1. Both of them are positive, so we're going to go up 2 and then right 1, up 2 and right 1, up 2 and right 1, so it looks like that. And then going the other direction, this would be down 2 and back 1. So instead of going up 2, we're going to go down 2. Instead of going right 1, we're going to go back 1. So this is down 2, left 1, down 2, left 1, down 2, left 1, and it just kind of looks like that. So before I draw the line, if we went down 2, that would be a rise of negative 2, and if we went left 1, that would be a run of negative 1. And you'll notice that if I have a negative divided by a negative, I still end up with a positive 2. So even the pattern that we're using to draw those lines, it works really well even in that fraction form. When it's positive or when it's negative, as we've seen on some of these. Okay, so that's example 10, and now let's take a look at the last two on this set of notes. So on number 11, it says write the slope-intercept form of the equation for the graph. So let's take a look here. Let's identify some key points. It crosses the y-axis at 4, and then we've got to figure out, well, let's see, we've got to find another point on here so we can find the slope. And again, we'd want to find a convenient point. So you'll notice, I notice that this point right here is right underneath the line, so we could use that one. It also crosses right here, so we could use that one. And notice that we get this little stair-step pattern that we've been seeing for a while. So every one of these, this would be down and right, down and right, down and right. Every single one of these would be the exact same slope. In fact, I'm going to change colors. We could do something crazy like this. We could go all the way down here and then all the way over there. Every one of those is going to work out to be the same slope fraction. So on this one, the b is 5. Now we just need to know what the slope is. So the slope on this one would be down 2, so the rise would be negative 2 and the run would be 3. And then just for the heck of it, I'm going to go ahead and write that down there. Let's check this guy right here. This would be down, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. So that would be a slope of negative 8. And then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So this would be a run of 12. Either way, if we do negative 8 divided by 12, 4 goes in there twice, 4 goes in there 3 times. So we end up with negative 2/3 either way. So let's write down the equation of the line. So we're going to write down y equals negative 2/3 x plus 5. And again, once we've practiced this enough, notice how we can just look at this and say, okay, I know this needs to cross at 5, and I know the slope needs to be negative, and it's not very steep. Crosses at 5, slope is negative, and it's not very steep. We can kind of match up the way the line looks with the equation once we've got enough practice with this. Now, on number 12, you'll notice that this is a little bit unique. Again, we're going to find the y-intercept first. The y-intercept happens to be 1. And if we were to pick some other points, let's say I pick this point right here, to get from that point to that point, we don't rise at all, so the rise would be 0. And the run in this particular case would be 5. Doesn't make any difference. The slope is going to be 0. Perfectly flat line. Remember, if it goes down from left to right, that's a negative slope. Perfectly flat, there's something for us to land on, so there's a number that represents that. The slope would be 0. And if it happens to go up from left to right, then it's positive. So on this one, we've got all the information that we need. We're going to write down y equals 0x mx plus b, so plus 1. And again, we're not going to leave it like that. We would normally simplify this, and we're just going to write y equals 1. And there we go. So that should have us set up. We are going to be practicing these for a while. Huge deal on the test. Please make sure you have these understood, and if not, make sure you ask a question.